Welcome to The Voice of Retail. I'm Michael LeBlanc, NRF Top Retail Voice for 2026 and Rethink Retail 2026 Top Retail Expert. This podcast is produced in conjunction with Retail Council of Canada. This episode is brought to you by Konek, Canada's way to pay. Visit Konek.ca to learn more. Rob, welcome to The Voice of Retail. How are you doing today?
I am doing great. How are you?
Fantastic. Where am I finding you today?
I am in New Hampshire. Big Toronto fan, though. Huge Buffalo Bills fan, and it's just across the water from you, I guess.
Well, Rob, I'm looking forward to diving into this new book of yours. But first of all, tell us about yourself. Who are you and what do you do for a living? You got a fantastic background. I see consulting and a lot of work in startups, but tell us more.
Yeah, totally. So I didn't expect to come into the startup world at all, but I started at McKinsey. I enjoyed consulting, but really didn't feel like I really knew anything and didn't feel like I had the right to tell any big company what to do. And so I started getting into smaller companies just to try to figure out how companies worked, and fell in love with startups, or at least the idea of startups, and then went to Harvard Business School to try to focus on how to build a startup. Took all the classes, read all the books, did everything that I was supposed to do. And raised some money, had followed all the playbooks to build my first startup, which was a startup selling into retail and restaurants. And yeah, it seemed on paper like it was going to work really well. And then it very much didn't for 2 years, where I was just hitting my head against the wall repeatedly, unclear why it wasn't taking off. And so that experience was so terrible that it caused me to get obsessed with why do startups take off when they take off. And I've been spending the last 5 years of my career just obsessed with the early stage of startups and how to make something that takes off. And I've been repeating that as much as possible through Harvard Innovation Labs, through advising a bunch of startups, and a little investing here and there.
Rob, I've gone through your book, and I think there's a lot of lessons here for retailers and the people who sell to retailers, the power of the pull. Now, looking at your background, you spent an extensive amount of time in business to business versus business to consumer. I think there's lessons for retailers, for example, they can extract from the book about how to understand their consumers. But that's really where your passion has been and where you have spent most of your time, yeah?
I've done a little consumer stuff before, but I would say I don't have what you would call consumer taste in that. And so I feel like I am just more personality-wise suited not to do consumer. And so I lean towards business stuff. But I've helped a bunch of consumer businesses. I really do study, why do new things that people haven't seen before work the times when they do work, and why do they not work hundreds of thousands of times they do not work. And so that applies across consumer and B2B. But I'd say my experience is most closely tied to B2B. And that's largely because I have learned this by watching sales calls, like watching thousands of startup sales calls. And in the consumer space, you don't necessarily have a ton of sales calls. And so it's harder for me to learn in the consumer space. It was way easier for me to figure this out by watching thousands of B2B sales calls where they are actually talking to people live.
All right, well, let's get into a little bit of the tradecraft of the book. It's your first book, and I'm kind of curious, as you approached writing the book, is this based on your experience versus long-time research, and you just felt like you needed to get it out into the universe and share what you had learned, yeah?
Yeah, that's actually kind of how I approached this book and how I've approached my life for the last 5 years, which is I'm doing the thing that you couldn't pay me not to do this. Like I can't not think about how to make startups take off, and I can't not write about it. And so writing a book is probably the worst thing you can do. Just from a ROI, from any sort of ROI mental health standpoint, like it's like starting a company, except the returns aren't there for it. And so you only do it if you just can't not do it. You can't find a way to avoid doing it. And that's where I found myself I was just writing, I wrote 8 full drafts of this book as part of trying to figure out how this really hard thing works. and it's all I think about. It's all I focus on. And it's just, I'm probably, and I just don't look forward to this, but I'm probably eventually going to wind up writing a textbook on this because there's just so much to cover. There's so much interesting stuff here that I see it coming and I'm not looking forward to it.
Well, it's interesting you say that because you're bordering on an economic treatise here. You've really asking us to have a really fundamental rethink of how demand works. So you refer to it often in the book, this essence of supply and demand, traditional economic terms or business terms. And so let's break it down. So talk about your basic model. Talk about the macro model, so to speak, the P framework, PULL. Take us through it.
Yeah, so where I like to start with this is where we often get things wrong when we're trying to build something new for businesses or for consumers. And the main thing that we get wrong is we think they're going to want our product. If we think our job is to make them want our product, then we're just going to hit our head against the wall repeatedly for years, trying to convince them they should want something that they are never, ever going to want. And so the concept in the book that I come up with, as you mentioned, is demand versus supply. If you think that somebody is going to want your product, you basically think that demand means wanting supply. And that leads you down this recursive rabbit hole that we don't have to go down. But we have to, what I've realized is that we have to think of demand not as wanting supply, but demand is a standalone concept. It is out there in the world. It has nothing to do with supply, or it has nothing to do with products or services. It is a person who is trying to do something in their life. And sometimes when they're trying to do something in their life, they pull something from the supply side. They pull a product into their life to do the thing they're trying to do. And if you separate these two things, demand versus supply, demand what they're trying to do in their life, from supply, the means, the tools that they use, then you can realize, oh, wait, I just have to go out and find demand. It's out there in the world. And I'll pause there for any questions that you have. But the next level of that is, okay, if I'm looking for demand, what specifically am I looking for? And that's where the pull framework comes in.
Let's talk about that famous quote from Henry Ford. If I would have asked the consumers what they wanted, they would have asked for faster horses. And I think it's interesting. I find it very insightful because it means, people don't always know what they need. But I think there's some applicability in your model, yeah?
Right. And that quote is really, really useful for understanding the difference between demand and supply. So when Henry Ford says, actually, I don't think he even said it, but we'll pretend.
Yeah, we'll give it to him.
We'll give them that quote. If I asked people what they wanted, they would have said faster horses. That is, if I asked consumers what supply they wanted, they would have said faster horses. That's not asking them what demand they have. If I ask them what demand they have, or if I figure out what demand they have, it is for a faster way to get from point A to point B. So consumers are experts on the demand side. What are they trying to do in their lives? And what are they stuck with? Like, what are they stuck trying to do with their existing options? That's what consumers can tell you. Our job as innovators, as people trying to build things, is to understand what is on the demand side and conjure the right supply to make that happen. And so that Henry Ford quote totally conflates what consumers want with wanting supply, when it really is, what are they trying to do in their lives? What's on the demand side?
Well, and that's the pull part, really, right? I mean, the entire thesis of the book, I love some of the ways you colorfully describe your journey getting there, getting to this conclusion, like, your time in the pain cave, so to speak, and whether it's trying to figure out the difference between should they want and will they want, and then have a model develop from there, yeah?
Yeah, and so my experience coming to the pull framework, which again is a model of demand where if you find pull, people will rip a product out of your hands. If you don't find pull, they would be weird to buy it. So my experience was trying to sell into restaurants and retailers a tool that offered a ton of value to them. Like, basically instant ROI. It solved a really big problem that caused them constant pain. And they said it was unlike anything they had ever seen, right? And so in my mind, as I'm trying to sell this, I'm checking all the boxes of like, oh my gosh, this is going to be big. And then they wouldn't buy it. And so what I learned from that is that they can have a big problem. They can have huge pain points. We can offer them unique value. And even if that's the case, they won't buy it by default. It would be weird if they bought it by default because, right, it's probably something, there's a bunch of other things that they have big problems about that they're not doing anything about. Or there's a bunch of other high ROI things that they're not taking action on. And so we have to get from this case where, yeah, they totally should want something that solves their problems, or they say they will eventually want something that solves their problems or provides this kind of ROI. That, like, none of that matters. Instead, what we have to do is we have to focus on what are they trying to do right now where they are stuck because their existing available options, tools, methods are not good enough to help them get the thing done they're trying to do. When that is the case, when you find that, they will rip a product out of your hands. I found that, and we went 0 to 4 million ARR in 2 years after spending 2 years at basically zero, hitting our head against the wall. But until I found that, nothing else worked.
So take us through a scenario where you're in a conversation, let's say the retail buyer, restaurant buyer, whatever, and you've got the solution, you know it is a problem, you know it's industry-wide, you surmise, I guess, I shouldn't say you know anything, but you surmise their problem, but yet you just can't get it over the finish line. Is it that idea that it's being crowded out by other demands and there's just not enough urgency? Is it an urgency factor?
What will usually happen is you'll be in a sales call and you will talking to a real. So I sold a labor management tool into retailers.
Very important.
Very super important. And what would happen is I would get them on the call and I would ask them a series of questions like you're supposed to do about their pain points and problems. 100% of the time, they would be like, oh my gosh, it's so annoying. It's the worst. It's costing us so much money. And then I would say, I would interpret that as, okay, cool. They have the problem that I solve, which is true. And then I would go and pitch my product and demo it. And they would say, wow, this seems like it would definitely solve our problem. And I would interpret that as they want to buy it. And so I would push that. I would try to convince them to buy. Great. What should next steps be? How should we move from here? But nothing in that has said that they're actually going to buy this. They actually want to take action on this now, because in most cases, they were just like, yeah, they could complain about their labor management situation, but they didn't have to do anything about it. And so when our startup actually took off, it was because somebody reached out and said, hey, I know you were trying to sell us this labor management thing. We're really stuck on hiring right now. We can't hire enough people. We are understaffed. Can you help us figure out something here? We'll pay you to do that right now. We are stuck on this. And that's it. And the difference there was that they could complain about labor management forever and not do anything. They couldn't, and at least in that moment in time, they couldn't do nothing about hiring. They were dramatically overstaffed, and they were trying to pull something that would help them hire more employees fast.
And from the outside in, without your perspective of telling you I need this desperately, if only someone had a solution for it, how do you suss out what this big demand is going to be?
I don't know if you can predict what's going to be the big demand. What I've found in every case is that you find one person who is stuck. So maybe you find the person who's in charge of loyalty, and that person is really stuck on this new thing that they're trying to do. And you're like, okay, that's interesting. That one person in that one retailer is stuck. I feel like they're a couple months ahead of other retailers. So let me do this. I'm going to go and take that person's kind of story and show it to the other people in charge of loyalty and other retailers and see how do they react to it? And do they, there's two kinds of reactions. Reaction one is, oh, wow, that's super interesting, which means, no, I'm not interested, right? The other reaction is, oh my gosh, that's exactly what I'm also trying to do right now. In which case, it's like, okay, cool. This feels like pull and it feels like repeating. So what you do is you find one person who is stuck, who you think is going to be representative of other people, and you test that by selling.
Oh, that's interesting. I often have that same idea myself. If I'm having a problem with something, I can't be the only one. There must be other people having a very, very similar problem. That's a really interesting approach.
Yeah, it would be weird if this person was the only one on Earth suffering from this. Now, that could very well be the case. It could be the case. And I'm going to test that. I'm not going to trust whatever I write on a whiteboard. I'm going to go and talk to a couple other people just to see. But yeah, like it is kind of rare for just one person to be in uncharted territory from every other retailer on Earth. They're not that different.
Now, if you put your retailer, your buyer hat on, let's say, and kind of role play, they would get 100 calls a day, so to speak, with vendors with a solution, and probably wouldn't want a call that goes something like, tell me what problem you have today and let me see if I can go solve it. I mean, what's your advice in terms of becoming that vendor that understands the what did you say, the unavoidable priority?
Yeah, in my experience, talking to a bunch of retail buyers, they usually can tell pretty clearly if a startup knows what they're talking about and specifically, have they done this before with other people who are like me? Are they speaking my language? If you don't understand what a startup is talking about, the problem is not you. The problem is the startup. They should be speaking your language and talking in terms of relevant case studies or examples of other retailers, what they were trying to do in their business, why they were stuck with the available options, and how the startup helped them get unstuck, and seeing if that is relevant to your case. But if you're hearing a bunch of stuff about agentic workflows and agentic AI and GPT 7.4, and you're just scratching your head, but you're like, these people seem smart, the answer is not that they are smart. The answer is like they may be smart, but they're not going to be able to help you. And in fact, you're probably going to waste a lot of your time and budget on people who don't understand how to make change in your business.
We'll be back with Rob Snyder from The Power of the Pull right after these messages. Abandoned carts and chargebacks are costly for Canadian retailers selling online. Today's shoppers want more than convenience. They expect trust. Konek delivers that. Powered by Interac and backed by Canada's leading banks, Konek is a digital wallet that gives shoppers more ways to pay at participating merchants. With Konek, Canadians can make fast and secure payments with an eligible credit card or with debit directly from a checking or savings account at participating financial institutions. Konek, Canada's way to pay. Visit Konek.ca to learn more. Well, you brought up the prospect of AI. It's already been almost 18 minutes since we started, and we haven't mentioned the word AI yet. So let's get into it. I mean, with what's going on today, what you're observing today, is it an accelerant? Does it make it easier? Is it is AI sitting in between the customer and the buyer? I mean, how do you see this revolution and what we're going through right now in terms of the work that you've been doing?
Yeah, I can see this from a bunch of different angles. But what AI is doing is it's breaking everybody's brain right now. And it's breaking our brains. I'll talk about from the startup's perspective. As a software, I'm like, software startup guy, B2B software startup guy. The way B2B software startups have often been built is you find a kind of niche problem that people are trying to solve, and you build like an isolated labor management tool or an isolated employee retention tool. And you kind of think about it in terms of the interface and the value prop of that tool in particular. And it's kind of, all the software we've built, we've thought of in terms of screens and kind of like depth of functionality, and all that functionality took a long time to build. And so along comes AI, and it seems like in a lot of cases, a lot of people can kind of do a big chunk of the stuff that we've previously done themselves. They can do it themselves with AI. So the pull framework talks about, people are trying to do some project on their to-do list that's unavoidable. That's the P and the U in the pull framework. And their list of options, first L, has limitations, second L. And so what's happening is the people's list of options is now including AI. Business owners, consumers, all these people. It's, using AI internally, using AI for search, using AI to build something. And that option is getting increasingly better over time. And so if your list of options does not have limitations, then you have to find different pull. And a lot of startups are finding themselves in this situation where what worked a couple years ago no longer works super well because people can it's not a perfect solution, but they can cobble together something that's good enough themselves. Or they can, they can ask AI for detailed recommendations on products and whatnot. And they're getting good enough answers, and they're kind of skipping the traditional ways they had done that in the traditional tools. So the solution there is don't get run over by AI. Find pull where the existing options are not good enough when you include AI as one of the existing options. And if you see the pace at which AI is improving, don't just lay down in front of the train track. Don't build something that AI is going to come and eat your lunch at in 3 months. Find something that is out of the direct line of where AI is headed.
Let's flip the script a little bit or adjust the lens and put yourself in the mind of or in the person of a retailer who's trying to figure out consumer issues. So, if you're trying to figure out what a consumer wants, we've touched on it in a number of different ways. And how do your principles work in trying to figure out how consumer demand or pull works?
Yeah, so I was thinking about this, and I think there's a story I could tell here where there are 2 grocery stores in my town in New Hampshire. So I live in this tiny town in New Hampshire. There are 2 grocery stores. One has cheaper prices for basically everything. The other has more expensive prices for basically everything. I go to the one that has more expensive prices for basically everything, not because and the question is why? And when you understand why, well, it's because it's a cleaner store. The experience of shopping feels nicer. The carts are always back in the, they're not just like out in the parking lot places. Right. And so if a retailer, like what we will often do as a retailer, as a business owner, is we'll kind of look at the objective things. People want to buy stuff for the cheapest possible price, right? And that sounds right. But then you notice people doing things you don't expect them to be doing. And like me, not going to the store that would save me money. And then you have to ask yourself, okay, why are they doing? What's really the project on their to-do list? And once you understand what the real project on a consumer's to-do list is, you're going to design things a little bit differently, right? It's why, upstate New York guy, Wegmans, right? I would go to war for Wegmans, which is a really weird thing to say about a grocery chain. But it's because they understand that what I'm trying to do is not just get groceries at the cheapest price or buy stuff at the cheapest price as fast as possible. It's way more nuanced than that. And the experience is designed around what I'm really trying to do as I'm shopping.
Last question for you. Putting yourself in the shoes of a major retailer, a CEO of a major retailer, what would you advise the single most important question they should ask their customers or even ask their vendors to try to uncover genuine, rather than rely on assumptions, genuine pull and what the market or consumers are looking for?
Yeah, I actually very much don't recommend doing customer interviews. I recommend following customers around and watching as they are doing the thing they are doing, watching as they are shopping, watching and kind of like watching throughout their day. And what I do is I look at moments where they seem to be struggling where they seem to be stuck, and trying to understand in what ways are they stuck? What are they trying to do that they are incapable of doing with our supply, with what we are offering? Where are the moments in the store they get stuck? Where are the moments when they're shopping online where they're getting stuck or where they're getting confused? And taking those as insights that might be indicative of what the real project on their to-do list is, and going and then seeing, does that relate to other people? Is it really about, the lowest cost shopping experience, or is it about something a little bit different here? Like, what are we missing? Who are our best, as we watch our best customers and compare them versus our less good customers? What's the real difference there? And what that will tell you is that'll give you some indication of what their pull is. And then you can kind of start testing that by simulating experiences and whatnot with potential customers and seeing how they respond to those experiences.
Well, my guest is Rob Snyder. The new book, The Power of the Pull, is available all the great places where you love to buy your books. Rob, if people want to get in touch with you, what's the best way? Maybe it's a keynote, maybe some insight work. Are you LinkedIn?
Yeah, so you can find me on LinkedIn, and you can find me at robsnyder.org. I do talks, I do advising, and I build stuff.
Well, Rob, congratulations on your first book. It's a big deal to get the first one off the shelves and into the universe, and it's a great read, so I encourage everybody to go pick it up, copy, and thanks for making time to chat with me on the Voice of Retail podcast.
Thank you, Michael.
Thanks for tuning in. If you like this episode, give it a 5-star review and share with friends and colleagues in the retail industry. I'm Michael LeBlanc, award-winning media entrepreneur and senior retail advisor. You can learn more about me on LinkedIn, and be sure and tune in to the award-winning Remarkable Retail podcast with my partner Steve Dennis, and my Global E-commerce Leaders podcast with my partner Jim Okamura. Safe travels, everyone.